Hey there, and welcome to this month's episode of the Fraternus Forge podcast. This is a forum for young adult Catholic men and women to come together in conversation on topics of faith and morality, for as iron sharpens iron, so one man or woman sharpens another. Our featured guest this month is Angele and Daniel Baczmaga, close friends of mine. We've known each other for the past couple of years. They're both very active in the young adult community here in Nashville. Most notably, both Angele and Daniel work for YCP Nationals, so young Catholic professionals. They're involved in the nationwide team that's in charge of helping chapters get started and checking in with chapters and supporting them and growing the organization as a whole. So yeah, great humans, great perspective. Very grateful to have them join for a conversation. So we start with an overview of Angele and Daniel's story. Like, how did they meet? What was it like being friends before actually going on dates? They cover their long distance element of their relationship as well, and seeking guidance from God in that process. And then from there, it's really an in-depth conversation on what it takes to build a successful marriage. And there's a couple of key ingredients that we unpack, including communication, accounting for differences in each other's communication style, teamwork, shared interests, prayer, etc. All plays a factor in this conversation, and it was very, very fruitful. And this is actually the first time that we've had a couple on this show. So that was a really cool, eye-opening experience. And they shared some really cool perspectives and played off one another really, really well. One thing that you will notice in this conversation is that you don't hear my voice all that much. And that is both unintentional and deliberate at the same time. So for context, I tried a new microphone setup for the recording of this podcast, and I was convinced that it was working. But in post-production, I realized that there were some just artifacts and sound quality issues with my voice. And so in the interest of preserving the content of the conversation and not distracting you with, hey, one person's voice is a lot more quiet than the others, I just cut all of my voice out. And so this is primarily a conversation between Daniel and Angele, and with me reacting to stuff in the background. So I hope that makes sense. And yeah. Appreciate you tuning in to the conversation this month. If you have ideas for future episodes, whether that's topics or guests, you can also volunteer you and your spouse if you want. You can send those to me at fraternusforge@gmail.com. You can also message me directly in GroupMe if you found this episode through GroupMe. That is it. Appreciate you listening to this episode. Let's jump into it.
A decent amount of my friends went to Clemson. And I stayed in Charleston, went to college in Charleston. And going into my freshman year, I started dating this girl who was a friend of, or a sister of one of my friends. And one of the times that I was up in Clemson visiting, we were going to go see her sister. And no, I don't feel like telling that story. Let's just...
No?
No.
Essentially, our first interaction was him coming with his girlfriend to hang out with his girlfriend's sister, who happened to be my roommate.
Yeah. And Angele walking down the stairs and me going internally, wow, that's the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. And then proceeded to date the girl that I was dating for about 2 years. And then we ended up breaking up, and in and around that time, the sister of my ex and her fiance, who is one of my best friends, I was in their wedding, they were having a -1 anniversary party.
They had a really long engagement, and they used this as an excuse to get everyone together.
Yeah. So a year out from when they were getting... Yeah.
That's really creative.
Yeah.
So a year out from when they were getting married, they threw a party, and so I drove up to Clemson and just hung out with all of my friends that were up there. And at this party, ended up sitting next to Angele as part of this game that we were playing, and I found out that she was joining the diocesan missionary team for the Diocese of Charleston, and was moving to Charleston. At that time, like, I was single, but I knew Angele was still dating the guy that she was dating.
But little did he know, we had just gotten in a huge fight that day.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So idea. So from my perspective, like, she's dating this guy they've been dating for a while. So I just completely platonically was like, if you need help moving, like, here's my phone number. I live in Charleston, and like, I'm not doing anything over the summer. So if you need help moving in, like, feel free to reach out. because I was really good friends with the group of missionaries the year before Angele.
Yeah. And so by the time I moved, maybe a month later, I was single and moving to a city where I knew like one person who happened to be an ex. But we're really
also
good
one
friends.
of my good friends as well. Yeah.
And so I was like, Patrick, can you help me move? And he was like, yeah, if I'm not busy. I'm like, great. That's really non-committal. He was married with a family at this point. So I'm like, you have a pretty busy life. So I found Daniel on Facebook and sent him a message like, hey, can you come help me move? Yeah. And he came, helped me move. This is probably like 2 or 3 weeks after a really rough breakup. And yeah, he was just there.
Yep. And now we're married.
That's the whole story.
Because I was just there. Yeah. No. So we just became really great friends.
Yeah, we both recognized like we were out of long relationships that were pretty rough towards the end. We each just like had a lot of our own healing that needed to happen before we were ready to date anybody. So we decided just to be friends. And yeah, and then like I think I had decided to do a longer dating fast. So I had to do a month-long dating fast as part of the missionary team that I was on. But I chose to extend it just knowing that the Lord had a little bit more work to do in my heart. And like he went on some dates with some other girls. And at this point, like I'm giving dating advice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Angele was one of my best friends, and like I again was just I lived 3 blocks away from the missionary house, and Nick Campos, who ended up being one of my roommates and one of my groomsmen, he was also on the team, and I was really great friends with him. So I would just go over to their house and hang out, and we would all go on walks and hang out in downtown Charleston. And so, yeah, we were just really, really great friends.
Yeah. And then the girl that he had gone on a few dates with broke things off. And I was really happy about that. And I was like, oh, shoot. I didn't realize I still had feelings here.
Okay.
Yeah. And then soon after that, I was coming to Nashville for an interview. And
was this with Holy Family or someone else?
it was with somebody else. It was one of those things where I'd thought of moving to Nashville after graduation. I had never been here, and I just thought it would be a neat place. I thought I would like it. And then towards the beginning of my missionary year, the Lord put 2 opportunities in Nashville in front of me. It's like, okay, I guess you were just preparing me for the future. Yeah, so I was coming to Nashville for interview for a job that I ended up not taking. And while I was here, Daniel and I were FaceTiming, and he was just acting really funny. And so I was like, hey, Daniel, how do you feel about me probably moving to Nashville? And his response was,
well, I don't know if I could do long distance again. And we were not dating at this point. We hadn't even talked about dating at this point.
To which my response was, well, you skipped a few steps there. Yeah, but then a few months later, I came back. I tried avoiding my next interview in Nashville, and there was just no getting around it. I had to come. They were paying for everything. There was no good excuse. And got that job. And so Daniel and I had to kind of figure out, like, hey, what are we going to do before we left? Because we didn't want to start a relationship long distance. We wanted to have some time in the same city. So we dated for like 3 or 4 months, maybe in the same city.
Because I was still finishing up my undergrad. So that was my junior year when we started dating. And so we dated in person for 3 months before Angele moved to Nashville. And then we did long distance for about a year. And then when I graduated, I like immediately started networking like remotely with folks in Nashville, and would like come up like even when we were still dating and I was finishing up my degree, I would come up whenever I would have like spring break or fall break or anything like that. And like talk with people, go not necessarily on interviews, but like go to lunch with people, go to dinner with people to like try and get a lead, and ended up finding a job for a cybersecurity firm that was entirely remote, and that let me move to Nashville. So I moved to Nashville with $17 in my bank account, 3 suitcases full of clothes, and no car. Lived in someone's basement for like 2.5 months before getting a car, getting an apartment, and then getting a ring. And so that was kind of the goal, and executed it flawlessly.
That's awesome.
And he had me completely convinced that he couldn't afford a ring yet. And so when he proposed, the first word out of my mouth was actually the word no. But that's a no of disbelief. Like literally he got down on one knee, and I'm like, he's pulling a Jim Halpert. And then he pulls out a box, and I'm like, still don't believe it. I literally did not believe he was actually proposing until
really
I saw
to this bit.
the ring inside.
Daniel's so poor. He has no money.
It was the middle of December, and he really wanted to go hiking. He's like, we haven't gone hiking in a while. We haven't like taken pictures in a while, because like I've done photography, he did videography, and so he had me convinced that that's what he wanted to go do. And it was the day of like a big service project at my church that I wanted to help out with, and he was like, no, we're going hiking. And I was like, we'll see how the weather is in the morning. And then we wake up, and it was gross outside. It was like cold and rainy, but he was not giving in.
No, we're doing this.
Yeah, so we went on a hike. The rain held out for us. And but then like started downpouring on our way home. Yeah. So, but he had me fooled.
Yeah. So it was a short hike, not super long.
Yeah.
To Burgess Falls, which is like an hour outside of Nashville, and yeah, I remember overhearing this conversation. I don't remember exactly what the like context for the people happening was, but the guy proposed to the girl in a restaurant, and Angele and her mom were both kind of talking like, that's like so much pressure. There's not the opportunity to say no.
Right.
Which completely understand. And so I was like, well, we both absolutely love nature. We love hiking. We love going to national parks, that type of stuff. And so I was like, well, we can go hiking to a waterfall, and then I'll propose there. And because it was such a dreary day, like there was almost no one there. And like as we were hiking, like the last couple steps leading down to the falls, the only people that were there were leaving. And so we got to like the entire falls was just us, which was really cool. I don't know, I've only been in one other relationship, which was the one before Angela and I started dating. And we didn't have the healthiest relationship. Like it was a bit like codependent. And so I didn't really know how I was supposed to be treated. And so I remember in like the first month or so of Angela and I dating, like I remember verbally saying to her, I didn't realize you were supposed to feel good about yourself in a relationship. And Angela was like, what? Because like whenever my ex would have really low lows, like she would rely on me to like pull her out of those. And when the highs were really high, it was super awesome. And we also dated long distance the entire time for that relationship. And so, yeah, that one of the things that just struck me was how much Angele cared about me and like showed love to me when I'm used to kind of just self outpouring and just being like, how can I serve? Like, let me do everything I can for this other person. And so I think that was one of the first things that I noticed. Even before that, like the girl that I was talking to before my ex and I started dating, I mean, we talked for 10 months. And then when we went on our first date and I had my first like kiss, on the drive back, she was like, actually, I've gone on 2 other dates with another guy. And I was like, oh, what? So, yeah. I just don't know how to talk to women just in general. So, yeah. Let's go. And so, yeah, it was just really, really nice.
And then I think my dating experience prior to meeting Daniel was very different. I probably dated too many guys in my life, and I had good and bad experiences. Like I have exes that are still good friends. And I have some that I'm happy to never see again. But I think with, I guess, my relationship that I had just come out of, I was just ready for next steps and the other guy wasn't. And then that just really affected our relationship in a lot of ways. As much as I was like trying to be patient, I think like he just kind of fell out of love and like fell out of commitment in the relationship. So yeah, I think that just kind of came to the point where I was just like, if you're not confident that we are going to take these next steps, like I'm not able to wait any longer. And then I think with Daniel, he was younger than me, so I was a little bit nervous that would happen again. But I think fairly early on, you know, I kind of told him like, I'm going to do my best to be patient and like to work with your timeline. And he was like, oh no, like I'm all in. Like, let's do this. And
I may or may not have, before we even started, like went on our first date, like the week before was my 21st birthday. And I, as one does on their 21st birthday, accidentally became very, very intoxicated. Accidentally, of course. As one does.
He had a lot of friends who wanted to buy him drinks that night.
Yeah.
Me
Shout
included.
out, humble brag. I have a lot of friends. But I at one point, like I don't really remember this, but in my intoxication, I called Angele and I told her that I was going to marry her. And this was before we even went on a first date. So yeah.
I think because we had such a solid friendship first, that's why it wasn't so scary. Like while we had just started dating, we had really already spent 6 months discerning a relationship with each other at some capacity, you know?
Just spending time around each other.
Right. Yeah. So...
yeah, it would be a lot weirder if Angela and I had like talked twice and then on my 21st, like then called her and been like, we're getting married.
Yeah.
That would have been like, no, lock me up.
And I don't remember if it was before this or after this, but like we literally had a conversation. I think Daniel was like, I don't know, like maybe we should just like call it off. I feel like you like me a lot more than I like you, and it's just like going to cause issues. And I was like, well, I was literally about to say the same thing, so maybe we're okay. And then when I was getting ready to move, I was just like kind of nervous about doing long distance, and like, I don't want to do this if this isn't like the guy, if I'm not in love with him, you know. And it was 2-3 months into actually dating, and so I was thinking about breaking up with him, and I did what all good Catholic girls do and did a novena to Saint Therese and asked for a rose, just to confirm like if I was supposed to keep dating him. And I didn't want, like, some girls like every single different type of rose has its own meaning. Like, to some people, it's like, if it's a yellow rose, we're meant to be friends. If it's a red, you know. I told Saint Therese, I was like, if you bring me a rose, I know I'm supposed to stay in a relationship with this guy. And if it's like your classic red, single-stemmed, like out of a romance movie, if it's a Beauty and the Beast rose, I know I'm supposed to marry this guy. So I did not tell Daniel about this novena.
I didn't find out about this until after we had gotten engaged. And unbeknownst to me, like, I was going to go hang out with Angele one day, and my mom has some roses in her front yard. And I was like, oh, it'd be really nice if I brought her a flower. And so I clipped a rose from my mom's front yard and, like, drove in to go hang out with her. And I, like, knocked on the door, came inside, gave her a flower.
I was at his mom's house dog sitting.
Yeah.
So he was, like, coming home from work.
And so clipped a flower from outside, then knocked on the door. and came inside my mom's house where Angele was dog sitting Rex, and gave her the rose, and like she was, oh, thank you, and then like disappeared to go put it in water. I didn't know that she was going into the other room to cry.
And like,
Really?
I was like absolutely freaking out. And it was a knockout rose that you get like from the front garden.
Mhm.
And I wasn't as familiar with my roses at the time. And so I'm like sending a picture of this rose to people like, is this a rose? What kind of flower is this? And it was hot pink. Like it wasn't red.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It wasn't quite there. Saint Therese was like, I'm not making your life that easy. You still need to discern this. But it was definitely confirmation of like, nope, this is a good thing and you should stay in it. And kind of after that, a couple of other things happened and I was like, all right, this is a good thing. We're going to stay together. And kind of in my mind, it was like, as long as this continues to be a fruitful relationship,
Mhm.
I'm going to stay in it. And here we are.
Right before she prayed that novena, it was maybe like a couple of weeks after that she was moving to Nashville.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, there was just a lot of like, she's moving, I still have a year left to finish my degree, all of that type of stuff. So
Yeah. And then like just continued on too with like, am I supposed to move
Mhm.
back to Charleston? Is he going to come here? And
Mhm.
all those different steps, there was just like a lot more to consider that we couldn't, figure out on our own. We needed that discernment and guidance. And so I don't think that was nearly as present in like my prior relationships as it was with ours, which again, like shows a lot. Having that rose and that kind of sign from God definitely helped. But I think like there was just like a certain step that I needed to make that helped with. Right. But like once I was able to kind of buy in to sticking it out and trying long distance, I don't know if it like helped much past that. Like again, she gave me a pink rose, not a red one. Like
Right.
I still had to continue to discern. And then it didn't affect Daniel because he had no idea.
Okay.
mhm. Yeah, and I think I mean, to me, Angele was already one of my best friends. B, I really enjoyed hanging out with her like all the time. And C, like I feel like I'm a little bit more mature than guys my age typically are.
Mhm.
Like even as a like junior in college, I was kind of already discerning marriage.
Mhm.
And I didn't, not to like dunk on Franciscan, but I didn't go to like Franciscan or like one of the Catholic colleges where it's like, oh, I'm gonna get engaged like while I'm still like, no, it was just, this girl is awesome. I really, really like her. Like I would love to raise a family with her.
Mhm.
And that's always just kind of been core to who I am as a person. Like I'm very family oriented, and I love my mom and sister, and like I always want to raise a family and be a father. And so like those things were priorities for me, and not like, oh, I'm going to figure out my career first. And then
I see it.
like I was like, I would rather get married to the love of my life, and then we can figure out the rest together with God.
Mhm.
And I think when you find somebody that's willing to sacrifice and go that extra distance to pursue you, literally and figuratively, like that
Please
means
don't
a
arrest me.
lot. Yeah. So I think too, like our relationship took a lot of work, and the fact that we were both willing to put that in meant a lot.
One thing that really I really liked that came out of long distance was like we would end our days by FaceTiming one another and then falling asleep. And we always ended our FaceTime calls by doing Compline, by doing night prayer together. And so it just fostered okay, it's not just like us talking with each other, but it's like we're going to bring our relationship like into prayer. And I know there's some people that are like, oh no, I'm not going to pray with like the person that I'm dating because like I don't know if I'm going to get married to them.
Mhm.
And I'm like,
because it's such an intimate thing.
that's, I mean, yeah, but like you should both be going to God together. That's the entire point of a relationship. Like, you're trying to get the other person to heaven. So if you like, you won't pray with the person that you're dating, like, that's to me, that's a little bit of like, then what are you doing type thing. And I don't think even particularly, I don't think I'm talking even that particular of like the two of us praying about like, oh, are we supposed to get married like together? It's more so just praying together, period.
And building that foundation in your relationship.
Okay.
Yeah. As opposed to, because like both of us, I would say both of us individually were praying like, okay, is this the person I'm supposed to, I don't think we ever prayed together. Like,
And I think like, again, with the intimacy of prayer, like we weren't spilling our hearts out in prayer together, right? We're, for the most part, saying set prayers, whether it was, you know, a quick Our Father if we were already half asleep, or night prayer has always just kind of been our go-to, and it's formatted so it's less personal, less intimate, but still building that foundation and bringing Christ into your relationship at all stages. And we had that very unique like scenario where I was in Charleston as a missionary and my team would do Compline every night. And so it started not just him and I doing it together, but he would like if he was over at our house, he would join the team in Compline. And then it was part of my routine. Like Mondays were our days off. And so we didn't do community prayers, but it was on me to make sure I was still doing morning prayer and night prayer. And so like if I was hanging out with Daniel on a Monday night, we would do it together. And so that was something that was like, it was a part of what we did just out of routine. And then we continued with it.
Yeah. And to your point, I don't know that I would like, oh yeah, we've been on one date, let's sit down and pray a rosary together. Like perhaps save it for a couple dates in, but yeah, like it's important to incorporate the spiritual aspect into the relationship. In my opinion, like fairly early on, not necessarily like when I say fairly early on, I mean once like you have asked her to be your girlfriend, right? Not necessarily like, oh, we've gone on 2 or 3 dates. Not yet. But like once like you have been forthright and been like, hey, would you like to be my girlfriend? I think at that point, that would be an appropriate point.
And like on our first date, so my team, we also had a holy hour at the Perpetual Adoration Chapel, and we rotated who would take the hour, you know, from week to week. And it was I almost completely forgot it was my week for the holy hour, and we had our first date plan. And so he got to come with me to do a holy hour on our first date. And again, so it was just always part of things, whether that was planned by us. But I think the Lord kind of planned that and planted that for us.
The pandemic hit while we were planning the wedding. And so we lost like a $6,000 deposit on our original
venue. My mom was not a pleasant person in that situation. But yeah, so COVID hit. We got engaged in December, had gotten the bulk of the planning done, and then COVID hit in March. And as soon as COVID hit, we're like, oh, we don't have to go into the office. Let's go visit our families. Like, we have this time. So we hopped on the road. We went to Charleston. Unbeknownst to us, we were taking COVID with us.
I was case, I think, number 7 or 8 of COVID in Charleston.
Oh, wow.
So all of a sudden, like we're engaged, we're quarantined together
at my mom's
with
house.
His family for 3 weeks. And this is like at the time where they're threatening like to block off roads so you can't go state to state. So
this is early COVID.
This is early COVID.
This is like when we went to go get like tested, like when I went to go get tested, they had military barricades and people were in full like quarantine suits,
full hazmat suits.
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
and
I
doing
Yeah.
the test, and it like the test went up and picked like the top part of your brain through your nose, and like so I went and got tested, and like the next day, like I got the call and said, yeah, you have COVID, and then we went on the John Hopkins like tracking whatever that they had like a map, and it like said how many cases, and the cases went up from 5 to 8 that day. And so I was one of those. Yeah. So sorry, all of the friends that we hung out with right before we got.
Yeah. And I think his sister ended up getting COVID, but his mom and I didn't. But we all just like were quarantined together for 3 weeks, I think it was. And then after that, it was almost Easter. So we're like, well, let's go hop down to my parents at the beach and spend 2 more weeks in Easter with them. So we had a lot of time spent with each other's families during our engagement period. So we were living in closer quarters because we're living under the same roof for like 5 weeks. And then, just got to know each other's families better. And there's, good that came out of that. But then also we like saw more fully what we were getting ourselves into, and accepting, each other's families for their good and their bad.
Around that point, I began to grasp how large Angele's family is, because for me, like it's just me, my mom, and my sister here in the United States. The rest of our family is in Poland, and both my parents were only kids, so I have like no immediate cousins, and so like seeing, oh, this is how a big family like interacts with one another, and this is how like I hopefully like we would like to have a little bit of a larger family. And so I think in my brain that kind of like set this is what that's like, kind of confirmed that I wanted to have a larger family, but B, kind of I got to see, this is kind of the relationships, how they're different between a small family and a larger family.
I think one of the main things that I learned is how much differently Daniel's mom responds in situations than my mom does.
Okay.
Like our moms, they're both very strong women and very stubborn and strong-willed women, but in very different ways. And so I think that just kind of came to the table, and just like the way that they care and respond to something as little as illness is drastically different. And so I was able to learn that and kind of prepare myself. His mom responds in a much more proactive, like gives you all of the vitamins that you could potentially need, all of the, was giving us gloves and masks and all of those types of things. And so she just...
I think those are still in my car.
And it shows with like how each of them are as grandmothers with their children too. Like when Daniel's mom is here, as soon as like she gets home,
washing hands, wiping down counters,
and doing all of that kind of stuff, where my mom is like, oh yeah, your hands are dirty, you'll be fine. So it's yeah. So just very different approaches that we started to learn then, and now we're like really seeing them play out with how they grandparent.
It just boils down to large families love their children less. That's really what it is.
But yeah, Daniel's parents.
There you go.
Yeah, Daniel's parents were both only children, and my mom was one of 8 and my dad was one of 5. So just like their upbringings, which trickles down into our upbringings, were just like so drastically different. And so I think our whole dating experience, and marriage experience, we've just been like learning that about each other's family and like the differences that means, which is, I never would have like thought how much of a difference that makes, but it really does.
My sister is 8.5 years younger than I am. So I was 8 when she was born. So I remember like her entire like infancy and like toddler and like grow. So I saw her grow up and be completely fine. And Angele worked in youth ministry for a very long time, and I've volunteered in youth ministry since like high school, through college, and then after college as part of Angele's high school program. And both of us saw the impact that kind of parents that are like helicopter-ish, right? But like, I feel like your first, like when you have your first kid, you're like,
Oh my gosh.
yeah, like get away from that. Like, and just like in like there's like a Chihuahua-esque like anxiety that most first parents have. And like, because I saw Kasha like grow up in front of me, and Angele saw like the effects that type of parenting had on their kids, both of us are pretty like laid back. So like, I mean, for example, when Magdalena was maybe 3 weeks old, we went to Gracie's housewarming party. And like most people, when they have a 3-week-old, are like, no, like we can't see people. Like we have to, like, what if they get sick? What if they... And we were like, no, please take Magdalena from us, hold her. And she like fell asleep and like had a deep sleep for the first time in a while.
So she fell asleep at the party, and I wanted to make sure she would sleep while we were able to sleep. And so I literally have people passing her around the bonfire, like, somebody wake up my child. And she ended up like, she slept a while. Eventually she woke up, and then she had like the best night's sleep that night that she had in a while. Yeah.
And I think she was probably, so there's a thing with children where they can get overtired. And so they struggle to sleep as a result because they're just so tired. It doesn't make any sense, but it's a thing. And
happened to Dad on Christmas.
She was overtired, and as a result of us taking her like to Gracie's housewarming, and like her being passed around and like falling asleep, and like the noise of people talking in the background, very akin to like white noise that's in her room right now, right? And so it just helped her sleep. And like most, like I said, I feel like most parents, like first time parents, are going to be like, no, we can't go to and both of us being a little bit more laid back and having seen the effects, like, yes, like you need to be worried about your children. Like you need to make sure that they're not doing this or that, and like caring about them and loving them. Yeah, duh. But like there's an aspect of like, they're gonna be okay.
And there was like, as soon as I got pregnant, I feel like all these parenting things just started showing up in my algorithm on Instagram. And so there are so many things too about like how you are with your first kid versus how you are with your second versus how you are with your third. And I'm like, okay, these third children end up fine. So why are we stressing so much on our first?
Right.
And so I think like with COVID, with how much we spent with each other's families, we just had a lot of conversations about what we did want to do versus not want to do, and what we wanted to bring into our families versus not. And then having those different experiences, me teaching, being a youth minister, him with his sister, and then kind of like seeing those trends, we're like, why are we going to stress ourselves out more than we need to? We're able to go into parenting kind of with that mindset. Yeah, like Magdalena busted her knee on a walk last week, and I don't think she noticed it for like 10 minutes. It wasn't until I was like putting ointment on it and cleaning it off that she's like, oh, there's something going on there. That's wrong. I'm upset now. Yeah. So.
Yeah. And like I said a couple minutes ago, it's not that you're not like concerned about them or not like caring about them. Like you are, and you want the best for them. And ultimately you want to raise your children to be independent, like well-functioning members of society that are good humans. And in order to do that, they have to be independent, right? And so being able to show love, but also like letting them like try things out and fail on their own and learn, oh, like this is like, I'm going to burn myself if I touch the stove type of thing, right?
And I think too, like we kind of still emulate a little bit how we were raised in that. Like I think Daniel is more cautious than I am with her. Like if she grabs a glass off the table and is carrying it around, like I'll keep an eye on her, but I'll let her do it for a minute where he's more like, give me that. You are going to hurt yourself.
I mean, that being said, Magdalena has dropped a full-size mirror onto her head and was fine. So
She was.
please don't call Child Protective Services.
Yeah.
Did
If
she-
you are a parent,
did she
please
drop it on her
fix
head or did
that
she,
mirror to your wall.
It
It was
was
like a
like- yeah.
6 foot tall mirror that was leaning up against the wall. And so she started pushing on the bottom. And then, so when the bottom got pushed all the way
Yeah.
in, it fell.
No.
So we're getting ready for mass, and we hear this huge crash, come running out of the restroom, and see her just like literally with the mirror shattered around her and her
Yeah,
head
it was
poking through, just
terrifying.
like what it just happened.
And
Was she crying?
she's
Not immediately. Yeah.
She's quite literally sitting there with this 6 foot tall mirror, like like a collar around her, like her head is poking out the back of the mirror, and like the rest of the mirror is intact, but like you can see there's shards of glass in and around, and we're like immediately start freaking out. We're like, okay, we got to get her out, and she's like sitting there calmly.
She was
I think
so
she was
calm.
in
I
full shock.
think like when she saw us panic, she started to panic a little bit, but not too bad. We were able to keep her cool enough that she mostly kept her cool. I mean, it was amazing. She got away with like 2 scratches on her face.
Yeah,
and that
I
was
came
it.
away more injured than her. I had like cuts on my fingers from like trying to pick out the glass, and she was like perfectly fine.
Yeah.
I was like, what the heck?
And Daniel's like, well, guess we're not going to mass this morning. Guess we'll find a mass tonight. And I was like, no, I am not letting this ruin our whole day. And so we cleaned up like the necessary and
Just-
made it to mass 5 minutes late and
Yeah.
went on with our day. Yeah. Oh, it was terrifying and hilarious.
And there's, I think Jordan Peterson or one of the other folks kind of talks about this with parenting, is like making sure that they have a controlled environment to explore in. Like making sure there's not like external factors to like they're gonna be in danger, but like letting them like wander away a little bit further, but that like you're still fairly close and you can grab them, and like just giving them the chance to explore and figure the things out around them, whether that be like in the house or in the park or something like that, allowing the freedom of exploration. Because I mean, it's one of the cutest faces that she makes when she like sees something that's really cool and just goes, she absolutely loves dogs. And so like we'll walk by houses that have dogs and she'll just start going, ducky, ducky, and like wanting to go and like play with them. And we're like, no, we have to keep going. She has walked up to homes and knocked on the door.
Yep.
And we obviously like grabbed her really fast, but
I'm so curious, like the footage that some of our neighbors have on their Ring doorbells from when she is in this phase where she loves going for walks, but like when she's done, she just starts trying to go into the house that's nearest her. So she'll like climb up their front steps, knock on the door, and I have to go grab her. And so I'm sure people are like at work at 10 a.m. getting alerts like somebody's at your door, and they look and it's just
Magdalena.
and then I have to like carry her half the way home, which is great fun.
I think adjusting to parenthood at the very beginning is quite tough. Primarily because, I mean, people call their dogs fur babies or their cat, and no, it's not anywhere.
We
Close.
literally had conversations like, how are we going to love our child more than we love our dog, because our dog is the best.
Yeah.
And now we're like, how did we ever think that?
Yeah. But yeah, adjusting at the very beginning, like you're going to lose sleep, and that's when you set the expectation prior to, it makes things much easier, because I mean, disappointment is just expectations that are unmet, right? And so going into knowing, okay, I'm going to have to sacrifice my sleep, I'm going to have to sacrifice my sense of smell and changing poopy diapers and like this, that, and another, made it a little bit easier. And I think for me, what was really hard was that because Magdalena was nursing, when babies are very young for like the first couple weeks, they can't see anything further than like maybe a foot from them. Like they quite literally can't, like everything else past that is blurry. And so
Okay.
like she would have no reaction to me.
Yeah.
And like, so I would be like trying to interact with her and she like didn't care. And it wasn't up until maybe like 2 to 3-ish months in when her eyesight started to like actually form and develop.
Yeah.
And when she would see my face, that's what, like when I was changing her diaper, and would start like giving me small smiles. And that's like when the bond formed, because up until then, like I would just get frustrated because she'd be crying, be inconsolable, and she would only like really be calm when Angele had her, as opposed to me having her. And so that, as a father, was very difficult, because I was like, what am I doing wrong? When in reality, there's nothing that I'm doing wrong. The baby just only cares about eating and pooping. So,
And what's really amazing is the distance that they can see is about that distance from where they are, where they're nursing, to the mom's face. And so like she could see me much more clearly. And so like between being inside of my body for 9 months and nursing, and like that bond just comes so much more naturally for mom and baby.
Babies can smell mom. It's crazy.
It's
like,
actually kind of annoying.
Yeah. Especially when you're about to eat and then baby wakes up and wants to eat. Yeah.
Yeah. And like when we are traveling and she has to sleep in the same room as us, she's more likely to wake up and not go back to sleep until I console her, because she knows that I'm there, which is, yeah. But even if she can't see me, like they can smell mom and know that they're there. It's crazy.
And it's decreased the older that she's gotten. Like now, like if Angela is leaving, Magdalena will cry because she doesn't want her to leave. But as soon as like Angela leaves, and I think within like 2 or 3 minutes, like she's already calmed down and she's snuggling. And so like as she's gotten older, there's been less of like that. If that makes sense.
But yeah, like if I'm working in the front office and she knows I'm there, and like she's a lot more difficult for Daniel. Whereas like if I'm at the grocery store and she's here with Daniel, much easier. And even if we're at the grocery store, if it's just her and Daniel, much easier time than if it's all 3 of us. So I'm really curious to see how much of that is going to be consistent and how much of that is her. Like her specifically, because she's our first, right? We don't know to what extent that's just her personality versus
I think that's a
those
big
genetics
thing in parenthood, is figuring out, okay, what is my child's personality versus like the nature of them being a baby. And like catering to, because this is one thing that really kind of like always stood out to me, is that each child has each one of my children is going to have a different personality and receive love differently. And so I need to like know how to communicate with them, how to love them the way that they need to be loved. And in that way, I'm able to kind of show them the love of the Father, because the way that God loves each one of us is like shows his love to us is different, because each one of us is created uniquely, right?
Another thing that I think we've learned too with parenting is you have to let go of your desire to be in control. Like I think we all have that a little bit. And one thing that was so frustrating for me that I've had to work on is as soon as I figured things out, it would change. Like as soon as I figured out how to deal with, whatever eating habits, she would move on to the next stage. Like as soon as you figured it out, it's like, come on. And so it's really, just like learning to let go and go with the flow and grow with them. And we were at a conference in January, and one of the phrases that really stood out from one of the talks was float, don't fight. And so there's obviously there's an element that you need to like work and be attentive, but you can't, like once we stopped fighting against her and started just like doing our best to adapt to her. That helped a lot.
Does that mean that you don't set boundaries and expectations, like discipline and that type? No, like obviously you need to discipline your child, and you need to like set boundaries and make sure that they are aware of that type of stuff and are learning and growing in the right way. But at the same time, like if you have a preset mold that you think they need to fit into, like you're gonna cause some damage. Because they are their own person, despite what your like preconceived notion of, oh, this is what I think they're going to be like, or I think this is what being a parent's going to be like you just have to adapt.
And there's a lot of like, you know, she'll have a behavior, be throwing a tantrum or whatever it is, and we are just trying to stop it, right? But we really need to be like, okay, wait, why is she doing this? You know, why does she keep getting into this thing that she's not supposed to be getting into? Oh, she's bored. How can we help her with that, you know, like that'll stop a tantrum a lot quicker than you just trying to fight the tantrum.
I see.
If that makes any sense. So yeah, just like has expanded our way of thinking and responding.
If you were to pull it out like into adulthood, like we get hangry, right? Like, especially like we're in the middle of Lent, like Fridays in Lent when I'm fasting, like I notice that my temper comes quicker, or like I'm more reactionary, or like things just will frustrate me on a deeper level than they do normally. And that's like, that's the same for children, because they like what's essentially happening is you're reverting to your toddler state as an adult when you're hungry, because you're like, oh, I have this need that is unmet, so I'm going to be until it's met. And so like figuring out, oh, I'm angry right now. Why is that? Oh, I'm hungry. That's the same with children. Like with Magdalena, especially when she was very young, like within like 6 months, is like, okay, she's crying. I wanted to make her stop crying. So instead of like getting frustrated with her, I need to figure out, okay, does she have a poop? Is she hungry? Like what is the reason behind it? Is she bored?
Is she overstimulated?
Yeah. As opposed to fighting the, she's crying, I don't want her to cry, shut up type thing.
I mean, parenting involves a lot of creative thinking and strategic thinking, and yeah.
I mean, and it's not even just parenthood. It's like relationship, like bringing it back to like our relationship, like figuring out how the other person communicates. Like that was that was a big, one of the biggest adjustments that you make is like when you get married and you move in together, like you are moving into like you have a brand new person that you are adjusting, and you have to figure out, okay, these are their habits, these are my habits, and like how am I going to communicate with them so that it's effective, right? And so that we don't end up pissing each other off because they're doing something that we don't want them to do, and figuring out how to clearly communicate with one another so that the other person receives it.
Yeah. So this was really like the marriage retreat that we had to go on through the diocese. The one thing that we actually found really beneficial was this section on communication. And so it kind of starts talking about like if you're introverted or extroverted, but then also realizing like we have introversion and extroversion with where we get our energy from, but also in the way that we communicate. And so at first, like we think we're both extroverts, but I'm an external processor and he's an internal processor. And so like I'll ask him a question and I just like want him to respond right away. And like he just won't say anything sometimes. And I'm like, wait, I have to remind myself, I'm like, oh, he has heard me. Right. And I've had to tell him like, please affirm that you've like heard my question, but I need to give him time to think.
Yeah.
Or like if I do something that upsets him, his method it like he needs to take a step back and process.
Mhm.
Whereas like I'm ready to just like go and get into a heated argument
Mhm.
and work it out. But I've learned like that is just not fruitful
Mhm.
for him.
Mhm.
And so like we've had to adapt. Like one, he has to say something sooner.
Mhm. Yeah.
But then I also have to give him his space. And so like learning to not let myself spiral while he takes the time that he needs.
Like when I get upset, like I will like shut down.
Yep.
Like, and I'm
Mhm.
like, I'm having an internal dialogue with myself,
Right.
and like trying to process what I'm feeling. And I know, like when my dad passed away when I was a kid, I had to go to anger management. And so like, I know that anything that I want to say right now is not going to be beneficial to the situation.
Yep.
But at the same time, I need to say something, even if it's just like once, like the sentence, like, this happened and I'm upset about it. I need a minute.
Mhm.
And that lets me like communicates to Angele that, hey, this is the situation. And then I like need 15, 20 minutes to like cool off and then be able to have a conversation type thing.
Yeah. And I think with a lot of things, you have to have those conversations of like, what are your non-negotiables and where can we meet in the middle? And like that goes from communication to like house chores,
Yeah.
right? Like I hate cleaning the shower. Like we had that conversation of like, okay, what is your least favorite chore? I hate cleaning the shower. He hates hand washing dishes. Right. And
It
so like even though I hate dishes too, he really hates hand washing dishes.
Yeah. So like I will take all of the dishes that need to go in the dishwasher and put them in the dishwasher, and Angele will hand wash the rest of the dishes. And that way, even though she hates dishes, she's not mentally exhausted by the fact that
Right.
I've loaded the dishwasher and now I have to hand wash all of the dishes.
Right.
And so Angele absolutely hates cleaning the shower, so I'm the one that cleans the shower because I'm perfectly fine with doing that, and I don't mind doing that.
We had the conversation of like, okay, what chores do you absolutely hate? What chores do you not mind? And figuring out like, you know, which ones each of us was going to take and which ones we both just despise and we have to like
Usually do them together.
Yeah. I mean, we both hate dishes.
Yeah. So like that's how we split it. Like I can load the dishwasher. She does the
Right.
hand washing.
And then like feeding the dog. Neither of us particularly enjoy doing that like small menial task. So like that's not assigned to either one of us. We kind of split it.
Just back and forth.
Yeah. And same with like the general like picking up of the house.
Yeah. Like
that's usually a team effort.
I will go through and I do what Angele has nicknamed tornadoing, which with my ADHD, like I can make a room look spotless in like 15 minutes. Like if someone's coming over and we need the house to be like spotlight, yeah. I go in and tornado, and essentially I just walk around, I pick things up and I go and I put them in the spot that they need to go or near the spot that they need to go. And I just go and do that throughout. And so while I'm doing that, Angele is sorting the piles that I have created.
Or I'm like coming behind him and like actually wiping down the surfaces.
So that they're not just visibly clean, but actually clean as well.
Yeah.
And like, okay, I don't mind doing this, but you mind doing that type of thing. And if there are things that both of us do mind, or like the small menial stuff, like Angele said, like that's not assigned. It's like, oh, okay, I'll feed Luna this like right now because she needs to be fed.
Yeah. And then like I don't mind cooking, and so that's what I'm gonna do unless I ask him to do it for a night.
So I think one of the big things that you are discerning when entering into a relationship and you're trying to discern whether or not this is the person that you need to marry, you kind of have to agree on some foundational things. And those are kind of the way that you want to raise your family, like your religious or moral beliefs, and like your core values and the things that interest you. So those kind of 4 things. And so those 4 things are very important and need to be pretty close in alignment if there is to be a possibility. Because in the long term, like, you guys are, like, when you get married, it's awesome. It's great. But like, you need to be friends. Like, you need to enjoy doing the same things together and spending time together. And if you don't, and you don't like doing the same things, and you don't like agree on certain like fundamental truths of existence or how you should be spending your finances, like those types of things, like it's gonna cause a lot of problems down the line.
A lot of friction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I mean, once you're married, you're a team, and you need somebody that you can be a teammate with through thick and thin. And for us, it's been a lot more, like, our marriage has been a lot more enjoyable because we are friends first. Like, I don't think you can rely on, like, the passion of romance to sustain a marriage. Like, that absolutely needs to be a part of it. But a friendship, is lasting and sustaining. It's such a sturdy foundation, and it's made marriage a lot more fun for us. Like, we definitely have interests that do not interest the other person, and we allow each other the time for that. But then we also have shared interests. Like, we enjoy going outside. We enjoy playing disc golf. I think that has just brought a lot of fruit into our relationship. Like, people think we're nuts because we work from home. We both work from home, and not just both are we both working from home, but we work for the same company. And people are like, how the heck do you not get sick of each other? I think it helps that we're on different teams at work, but
yeah,
but like, we enjoy spending that time together. And when I started leaving the house more again, Daniel was like, oh, but I kind of want to spend all day with you again. And yeah, that's because
it's just
you want to
fun
spend
hanging
all
out
the time with your friend. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's a saying that Angel's dad has, which is, it's important to have my time, your time, and our time. Right. So it's important that you have time together and away from each other, because like, if you're just spending time together like 24/7, like, both of you're going to go crazy. Right. And so, like, you do need time away from one another in order to spend on those interests and those hobbies that are other from the other person. So like, I enjoy a whole bunch more nerdy stuff than Angel does, and it's important that I have that time to like go and paint D&D miniatures or be able to play some video games. And it's important for Angel to be able to go and do puzzles or do some kind of creative set, like refinishing furniture or those types of things that she enjoys doing. But having the things that are in common and you enjoy doing together makes, like you said, it makes the other feel less other and more like together. Because as Angel said, you're a team, you're a partnership, and so that sacrifice is a lot less when you're thinking about it, less from the fact like, what am I giving up for this other person, as opposed to what am I giving up for us, like together, right? Yeah, like, this is I'm going to accept that I'm wrong in this situation and get over my pride, because in the long term it's better for us, type of thing. And you shouldn't be a doormat. That's not what we're saying. Like, you shouldn't right. Like, know your value, know what's important to you, and like, be true to yourself. But also at the same time, there are occasions that you need to get over yourself, because you are one bread, one body, and like, you're a team. You're trying to get the other person to heaven. You're trying to get your family to heaven. And so if you're so bogged down in the, oh no, I'm right in this instant and I can't let go, then you're kind of hurting yourself in the long term.
Yeah. Another thing that just comes to mind too, when talking about this, is it goes a long way to do something with your spouse or with your significant other that they really care about, even if you don't really care about it. Right. So like Daniel loves Dungeons and Dragons. It's not my thing, but I don't hate it. Right. I can still enjoy it. And so like I'll play Dungeons and Dragons with him or like watch Avatar: The Last Airbender, but I'm not going to sit down and play Warhammer or Star Wars. Is it Legion?
Legion or Armada. Yeah.
Right. Or Star Wars Armada with him. Like there's certain things that are his thing that I'm willing and like happy to do with him. But then there's some things that I'm like, you can go for it, but that's not me. And so, yeah, just like finding those things that your spouse or significant other really enjoys, doing them with them goes a long way. And I think with your kids too, like when I would lead family retreats, we'd tell the parents like, hey, spend 20 minutes tonight playing a video game with your kid. And they're like, what? Like they would be so mad at us for making that suggestion, but it goes so far in making that other person feel loved and like heard.
Very much so. It's a similar type of like reaction, as though, I don't know if you've ever seen like the reaction of someone speaking a foreign language and then a person like all of a sudden starts speaking that foreign language fluently to them, and like their eyes light up and they're super excited to like be conversing in that language. Like that happens to me when I meet a random person, like I'm wearing a Polish like soccer jersey and someone starts talking to me in Polish, like I'm super excited and like I can't, like I'm talking with them. And it's a similar type of thing where like if your significant other really enjoys, we'll just use playing disc golf for an example. Like if they really enjoy playing disc golf and you're like, yeah, like it's fun. Like I don't know that I would go and do it by myself, like if we weren't in a relationship, but like me going with you means a lot to the other person.
And it's fun seeing their excitement, right? So even if it's not my, like I don't go play disc golf by myself, but I'm happy to go with him. And it's fun to see him dive into that, right? Which makes it more enjoyable for me too. And then when he talks about it outside of us playing together, I'm actually able to somewhat understand what he's talking about, which makes him feel more heard, and it's less boring of a conversation for me.
This person knows what I enjoy and will do it with me. And so like they understand on a fundamental level the thing that brings me joy. Like we've talked a little bit on it, but like the religion aspect, and right, I say religion and morality just because like, yes, we're Catholic and a majority of your listeners are also Catholic. Like not everyone is. And like we know a couple of friends who maybe they're Catholic, but they're significant, like their spouse isn't, but their relationship still works because they've talked about the things of faith and the way they view God and the use of contraception and like those like fundamental like moral things that a person holds. You need to have that conversation and understand, okay, why is this important to the other person? And is this something that I also agree with, type thing. So in terms of like in a Catholic and Catholic relationship, like Angela and I both pray very differently. And so it's important for us to have our individual prayer time, not just like our together prayer time and our family prayer time, but our individual prayer time, so that we're able to maintain that relationship with God on a one-to-one level type thing. But
and having those conversations about the importance of prayer, but also understanding the way that each other prays is really important, because I've had the experience where Daniel does a lot more of like the formal set prayers than I do. And so I would get to the point where I'm like measuring myself up to him, like, oh, should I be doing liturgy of the hours more often? Should I be doing a novena or a rosary, or should I be going to confession more? But the reality is I don't necessarily pray less or less effectively. I just pray differently from him. And so I think just like having those conversations is really important. And like, I think there are some things within our Catholic faith that are non-negotiables to some people, but aren't non-negotiables to others, if that makes sense. And so making sure like you're on the same page about those things. Cause like even, you know, some people look at natural family planning differently, right? In ways that are both within our Catholic faith, but are very different.
Yes.
That's
a really good example.
Right.
I was trying to think of like a teaching or a doctrine.
Yeah. And so being on the same page about natural family planning is really huge. And I'm sure there's others.
But also like liturgical preferences, that like type of stuff. We're very much a Novus Ordo family, but like my boss and his wife go to the TLM. Like there's I think there's a bit too much of like the viewing of the other as other when they're both valid masses, right? And like we lean more like we love a traditional Novus Ordo. We love a call and response in Latin. We like all of that. And yeah, so that's the way that we lean, but it's important that you and your spouse, or like you and your
because you want to
have that conversation.
Enjoy going to mass together.
Yeah.
Right. That's really important. And there's definitely the case, like you could have somebody who's very strong in their faith that loves the traditional Latin mass, and then the other person only wants to go to the more, you know, contemporary music mass, and like that would not always line up depending on how strongly you feel. And so while like Daniel and I have a different preferred mass, like we're able to find something that we both enjoy going to together. Yeah. And so making sure that you at least are able to find that space is really important. I think just the reminder that like marriage and parenthood are both very sanctifying, which is so good and so necessary, but also means that it's hard, right? And so you can have a great relationship with your kids, a great relationship with your spouse, but that doesn't mean it's not going to come with hardship, but it is going to come with so much beauty, so much grace, so much growth. Like it's crazy how I will go 1 minute like ready to punt my daughter because she's driving me nuts. And then like as soon as we get her calmed down or get her to bed or whatever it is, we look at each other and we're like, we love her so much. She's so sweet. Yeah. So it's the sacrament and the lifestyle of marriage is incredibly sanctifying, which you can't beat. But just remembering all that comes with.
All of the pieces came intact in the box, but was difficult to put together since there were no instructions.
That's right.
There's also just like one final closing thought is the I've always kind of struggled with corporal works of mercy of like feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, like that entire list of like, oh, but I'm not going to homeless shelters. I'm not like going and helping out at a food pantry. And you come to the realization of like, my daughter's hungry, I'm feeding her. My daughter's thirsty, I'm giving her drink. My daughter needs clothing, so I'm providing clothing. And so in that way, like caring for your children becomes a prayer. Like Angele was saying, like it is sanctifying. And so caring for them and like being loving towards them is a prayer in and of itself.
We hope you enjoy the background noise of children.
Mikey, say hello. No. You got it.
Don't.
You were making so much noise, and then when we ask you to make noise, you make no noise.
Can you say Luna? No.
Oh, come on.
She is the biggest extrovert, but takes a minute to warm up.
No, it's not.
It's not food.
We'll shut it off.